This segment I have called Bytes and Pieces. Bytes and Pieces, why? Just as a general headline to cover all of the things that we're going to look at. We're going to look at GPUs, we're going to look at CPUs, we're going to look at the latest, greatest smartphones and what you can do with it. And part of that was already alluded with Lewis' presentation. We have the latest Intel NUC and we have some of the greatest PCIe 4 SSDs here. It's not going to cover it all. It's not trying to be basically an all-encompassing thing. It's just trying to give you pointers and also to look at what has really changed in the last 5 years. A lot of things have changed, and surprisingly, a lot of things where we would have expected more progress, things haven't happened that we had anticipated. So, well, let's get going. Let's start by looking at CPUs and what has changed in recent years. We now look at what we have had 5 years ago and what we have today. 5 years ago, Intel, that was still Skylake architecture. Something like the Core i7-6700. We still have plenty of those machines around. AMD, 5 years ago, that was Athlon and Opteron, because the Zen architecture only got launched in 2017. ARM, 5 years ago, sure, smartphones everywhere, tablets, yes. Embedded everywhere. But if we look at today, things have changed, especially in the last one for ARM, quite dramatically. Intel now finally has Tiger Lake. It's already in the laptops. It'll come to the Xeons. On the desktops for now, it'll be 40 nanometers, and we hope then with the second half of this year, maybe we will see those then coming out in 10 nanometers as well. But I wouldn't hold my breath for that. We have already seen the launch of Zen 3, third generation on 7 nanometers for the Ryzens. Now we have seen it for the Apex being announced. And finally then, of course, the workstation, the Threadripper stuff is going to come as well. So all around, good progress. But the real sea change that has started to happen in the last couple of years was more and more ARM on server. And now with the giant Apple switch away from Intel, we're going to have more and more ARM on laptops, on desktops, but really in the data center also more and more ARM in the cloud, in any area. So ARM is really where a lot of things is going to happen. So if you think that Intel should be afraid of our friends at AMD, I think the bigger threat actually may be ARM in the long run. This is the Ryzen 9 5950. That is a 16-core Zen 3 Ryzen. That's the top level what you can get for desktop machines from AMD today. Of course, there's still the workstation range with the Threadripper going up to 64 cores, but it's still Zen 2. That should soon also upgrade to Zen 3. We just had the announcement of the Epic being lifted to Zen 3 with another 10-20% efficiency gain. That is already fantastic, and quite frankly, Intel has a problem. Well, Intel knows it themselves. Well, on the other hand, whatever they can manufacture, they can also sell, so the problem is kind of limited. But in terms of prestige or thought leadership, certainly currently AMD with their CPUs has the lead. We'll see how Intel will catch up, don't count them out. But for now, if I today had to build a top-end desktop or a top-end workstation, you are hard-pressed not to go for AMD. Of course, if you can find the darn CPUs, pardon my French, but it's the same problem that we have with the GPUs. The premium you got to pay, the suggested retail price is always a joke. If you can get it for it, then that's great. But at least the last couple of months when I've tried, I always had to pay premium. And yeah, that gets boring after a while. Nonetheless, they are available. You just got to pay the premium. And still, you can arguably say for the money you pay, you still get a premium quality product. Well, let's look at some of the numbers that we took. It's certainly interesting what you can squeeze into a socket these days. I'm quite happily can say that my personal workstation is a Ryzen 5950X, and it flies. As we have ported the Daniel2 codec already to ARM Linux, ARM macOS, Android, iOS, and so forth, here it is a benchmark that we did with the Apple M1 that is found in the Mac Mini, for instance. 84 frames per second, 422 of Daniel2 8K. 84 frames, not bad, but you will see a 6-core Ryzen, that's the integrated APU, meaning Zen 2 architecture with graphics, delivers 100. 8-core of the same type delivers 135. Epic 16-core 7302, 209 frames per second. And finally we see, for instance, here at 7402 Epic, that's 24-core, delivers 307 frames per second. Encode 8K 422 10-bit. Anyway, for an 8-core ARM chip, 84 frames isn't bad. It has a very low power consumption, so it's a good start. Let's see what Apple can bring in the coming months. We hear of great things, 12-core, 16-core, and if we then extrapolate the numbers of what we see today, well, there should be great things coming. But don't forget, we're really looking forward to the new 64-core Threadripper based on Zen 3. Because I expect that CPU is going to give us in excess of 1,000 frames of 8K encoding per second. Well, we'll see whether my prediction is going to be true in a couple of months. Watch this space. Oops, I almost forgot. That chart doesn't have the Ryzen 9 5950X in it. So if you wonder what kind of performance that has, it has 310 frames per second encode. So quite a bit more than the Ryzen 9 3950, which is just one generation before that. This is the new Intel NUC. Well, it's the latest generation of chips. That's basically the same chip you find in their latest laptops. 11th gen. Finally has 2.5 gigabit output, has 2 Thunderbolt ports. It's quad-core. It has the Intel Xe graphics, but I mean, compared to the 8-core AMD APUs, it is a little bit of a slow thing. But it has, and that's why it's interesting for us, it has the latest QuickSync in it, and that does 422 10-bit HAVC, for instance. And that is really something very interesting, especially if you want to build a very small contribution encoder. So that's alone worth looking at it. So let's quickly look at the specs of this device. And yeah, it's available now if you can get your hands on it, like with all the other hardware. That's the common theme, if you can get your hands on it. So let's use that also as an opportunity to compare the NUC from today from what we had 5 years ago. 5 years ago we had the Intel NUC 6, today the Intel NUC 11, and well, not really that much has happened. Well, if you look at the bottom, actually it looks quite nice. 5 years ago we used to have a CPU mark of 3,125, and now that has grown to a CPU mark of 10,810. So, well, 3.5 times the speed. Yeah, but the gods of Intel marketing basically just doubled the core count, and they revved up the frequency from 1.8 to 2.6 gigahertz. That basically would already have given you at least a CPU mark of 8,000-9,000. A little bit of the process optimization. After all, this went from 40 nanometers now to 10 nanometers, and there you go. There's your CPU mark of 10,810. Of course, now you have Intel Iris graphics in there, which is the other wonderful nice thing, which, as I said, gives you the new QuickSync with these wonderful goodies such as 422. Price-wise, that box here I have here did cost me, fully equipped with RAM, SSD, and so on and so forth, less than 600 euros. So an interesting box to look at for just that. It's enough to use the Core i5. There's no real reason to go to the Core i7. You have the same amount of cores, you have the same amount of threads. The only thing the i7 does, it revs a little higher in terms of CPU speed, in terms of megahertz, but that's really it. This is the RTX 4000. Not the greatest, not the latest, but it is still one of my favorite cards. Why? It's a single slot design. That means I can fit more of them into the same box. It requires less power. It's not so power hungry. It can be powered with just one connector. It is still Turing generation. Yes, it's not the latest and greatest Ampere, but it has two NVDEC units. It means it has two hardware accelerated decoder units, and this is the box that has the card inside that I would use to build a large multi-view. And that's basically what we've done for what Jaroslav has shown. If you want to build a server that will get you to, say, for instance, 100 plus HD signals decoded, H.264, HEVC, whatever, this is the card to work with in terms of density and value for money. Yes, the RTX A6000, the latest greatest Quadro Ampere card, has also two hardware decoders, but it's a dual slot design. It is almost twice as not expensive, but power hungry. In terms of expenses, we have to actually get 6-7 more times to pay for it. So yeah, what's there not to like? This is available. It's still shipping. So for a whole lot of projects, especially in the HD and even entry-level UHD range, also for playout, it's a good card. But it shares, of course, the same problem if we're talking HD or SD and you still need interlaced encoding. This card isn't it anymore either. Then basically your best bet is still the P2200 card that still does interlaced encoding, and that's still Pascal series. But it's still shipping, so you have to choose the right card for your project. Interlace P2200. Density for massive decoding RTX 4000. High-end 8K playout, graphics-savvy stuff. RTX A6000 certainly. So it is really a matter of choice and, well, being able to get them as usual. Let's look at the quick specs here in this little chart showing you which the cards are and where currently at least I was able to get them for, and that gives you an idea of what we're talking here.
Yeah, the important specs for the both cards that I singled out, the Quadro P2200 and the Quadro RTX 4000. The Quadro P2200 is still Pascal series, as mentioned, which gives us the interlace support. So for SD and HD, where you still need maybe 10 NTI, this is the card, especially for interlace encoding. You don't have that with the Quadro RTX 4000, but you have the wonderful two NVDEC units, which allow you to decode twice as many streams as with the other card. And because it's already Turing series, it has the better HEVC encoder if that's required. You can see the different number of cores. Basically, the RTX 4000 is twice as fast. But the Quadro P2200 has the advantage it is like they're both single slot cards, but it doesn't require a power connector. So the P2200 is completely powered through the bus. Anyway, both cards are shipping, are available on the market. I just checked today prices. I can get both of those cards and delivery immediately. $475 for the P2200 and around $900 for the RTX 4000. Both are still in active production, so that shouldn't be an issue. Let's have a look at what we had 5 years ago. In May 2016, we saw the introduction of the GTX 1080, the first Pascal card hitting the market. The top of the line was the Titan XP, and that had all the way up to 3,840 cores at 250 watt power consumption with a max of 12 gigabytes of RAM. Well, 12 teraflops was the result of that. Now, with 40 teraflops, is where we top out with the RTX A6000 with a wonderful large amount of 10,752 cores and up to 48 gigabytes as in the A6000. But of course it comes at a price. While the Titan XP when introduced was a mere $1,199, the recommended retail price for the A6000 is $4,650.
In case you may wonder why I'm actually holding a Radeon RX 6900 XT here. Well, we actually may have not officially said it, but if you followed our development online and you went to our Daniel2 website, we actually have ported the Daniel2 codec to support OpenCL. And when you want to run something on OpenCL, that at the moment, yes, you can run OpenCL on NVIDIA as well, but on NVIDIA, OpenCL is a kind of, the stepson that, although the black sheep that nobody is want to talk about. NVIDIA is clearly cuter, but on Radeon and on Intel, OpenCL is it. And so the fastest OpenCL number cruncher that you can buy for money right now is the RX 6900 XT, which I managed to get for only 20-30% over sticker price. And we made our benchmarks with that, and the numbers are actually quite nice. You could say the RX 6900 XT is right there up with the RTX 3080 or even 3090, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So quite a nice card. Of course, it lacks a little bit of the support and the usage and well, CUDA, if you want to say so, that NVIDIA has, but for pure number crunching and for the amount of memory that it comes with, and theoretically, if it was sold at the sticker price, it would be a very interesting alternative to NVIDIA.
So as you can see so far, all the numbers are just for NVIDIA cards. I haven't bothered to put the Radeon numbers in there yet for OpenCL because we are not completely finished with that. It's still some weeks away, hopefully, not more than that. We have decode numbers already, but again, I'd like to present the complete finished picture for OpenCL. But we believe that with the RX 6900 XT, we're going to really be in line with the RTX 3090. But let's have a quick look on the numbers. Previous gen with the RTX 2060, 262 frames of 8K 42 encode, all the way up to 781 frames per second with the RTX 3090. I'd just like to point out these are 8K numbers. And on decode with 8K, we achieve 1607 frames per second, 8K 42 on the RTX 3090. So in a not too long time, I'm really certain we're going to crack the 2000 frames per second mark as well. So you ask yourself, who needs 2000 frames of 8K per second? It just means that only by using a fraction of the GPU performance, I can then do, of course, 8K at 60, 8K at 120, and have lots of performance left on that card for other stuff, for filters, for effects, for AI. And for us to encode or decode 8K is just a nice little side effect that GPU can just do on the side.
And here it is. This is the latest and greatest SSD I have laid my hands on, for me. This isn't actually one of my personal workstations. It's the Samsung PM1735, half height, half length, PCIe 4. This is a 3.2 terabyte model. There's a 6.4 terabyte model, 12.8, and so on and so forth. It is incredibly fast. It has basically everything you normally use to build from loads of hardware devices, be it multiple U2 disks, be it other loads of striped disks. This beats it all. And actually, if you can get it and you can find it, it actually, from a value proposition it has, is very interesting. Let's look at the specs on the slide to have a quick rundown to see what it does. And there's more and more other devices of this nature coming onto the market, but this is currently my favorite.
So let's look at the numbers. As said, this device exists from 1.6 terabytes all the way up to 12.8 terabytes. You see the sequential read performance up to 8 gigabytes per second and sequential write up to 3.8 gigabytes per second for the higher end models. Prices, and these are street prices I just checked today, it starts at 362 euros plus VAT. For the entry-level 1.6 terabyte model, all the way up to 2,601 euros plus VAT for the 12.8 terabyte model. If you looked at this type of storage, say like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we were talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even millions, to get these performance values. And now this is something in the shape of a half-height, half-length card that you can plug into your home PC if you wanted to. At the prices is certainly something that you could do. This is ideal for database applications, for all kinds of number crunching applications, for cache drives, and so on and so forth. At that price, it'd be silly not to use it for stuff like that. Similar devices, not this Samsung device, they exist as U2 or U3 soon type of devices, meaning in a 2.5-inch form factor. So you can put 24 of them, say, in a 2 rack mount unit, aggregate the bandwidth even further. So you couldn't even saturate your 400 gigabit LAN connections as well. For a database, SQL database like you could use with Cinegy Archive, this is like nitrous oxide to turbocharge your database in terms of performance.
It's time to look at a little bit at smartphones. Smartphones, you would say, why are we talking about smartphones in broadcast? Because, quite frankly, as you have heard Lewis already saying, if you're looking at HD and even 4K, smartphones can be used for production purposes quite clearly. And here, with this is the latest S21 from Samsung, the Ultra 5G is actually claiming to do 8K recording, and it does. It's currently still limited to 20 frames per second and only does HEVC 420. But I mean, it is getting there. I have had the S20, similar claims, but here they up the ante. It's a little bit faster and has a nicer screen and has to justify its exorbitant price. But give it another generation or two, and then for 4K production, given the fact that this is actually a multiple optical zoom, and we're talking about already 10-fold zooms coming in, not just digital zooms, but optical zooms in these devices, then we're looking at something. This is the iPhone 12 Pro, not the Max, just the Pro. I didn't really fancy paying extra money for having an even larger thing that I can't put in my pocket. But the picture quality is great for what it is. It is just a 4K sensor. A 12 megapixel sensor here, but that means the sensors are bigger and the picture quality it creates is also quite nice. But compared, of course, to the 100-something megapixels you have here, there is no comparison. The future is this, and I guarantee you the next Apple smartphone will also feature a 12 megapixel sensor, maybe still for a macro, but everything else will also, the megapixel race is on. Apple has kind of refused to be participating in that, but I would be very surprised if the next Apple smartphone couldn't do 8K. Well, we'll see soon, September this year, whether they'll call it iPhone 13 or they're superstitious and call it something else. We'll see. I guess they'll call it 13. But hopefully it will finally do 8K. That'd be great, especially if you then scale it down to 4K. Of course, you've got even much better picture quality. Let's look at the specs here quickly of these phones, but that's just really as a pointer. We, of course, are very proud that we can say Daniel2 runs on both of this. So for us, there is a bright future in what we can do, even for broadcast recording applications in the very high end on these smartphones, not just H.264 or HEVC, but proper 422, 444, RGB, whatever. All of that can actually, given enough compute power, we can encode that on these smartphones today. It's 4K 60 for sure, but well, the sky's the limit. If they increase the compute power of these smartphones and they give us access to the wonderful sensors the way we want it, then sky's the limit.
Okay, here's some concrete numbers from some smartphones over the last 2-3 years. Snapdragon 855, Snapdragon 865, Exynos 990. So basically that's my old S20 from Samsung. Snapdragon 865 is in a number of other devices, even current devices. But of course, I'd like to put here the Snapdragon 888 values here, but I have not managed to get hold of an S21 with that processor. The Exynos, the new Exynos and the current S21 is a little bit of a disappointment. the numbers are only just a tad higher than what's shown here for the Snapdragon 865, and we seem to have a little bit of a, how do you call it, a thermal issue with that CPU. After only a very few moments, the benchmark really drops in numbers and really comes back to the values that we already have here for the Snapdragon 865. To see, maybe some firmware updates will improve that, but at the moment that's a thorough disappointment. So I hope that the Snapdragon 888 is a little bit better than that. And when I have that information, I'd love to update this chart for you. At the moment, 103 frames per second off, and this has to be stressed, this is 4K, we're not talking about 8K here, is what we can achieve with software encoding, purely CPU based. So there's the caveat that, of course, once we also will add the GPU to the mix here, the numbers will certainly go up as well. But in none of these cases are we close to our ultimate goal. My ultimate goal is, of course, 8K 60. 23 frames is what the highest we get here right now. Give us the Snapdragon 888, maybe we get up to 30 frames per second. Still no cigar. 8K 60 is the goal. Our hope is that the Exynos next generation from Samsung, which will also have Radeon graphics inside, that is achievable. Rumors say that that chip will already come out this year, so I hope that is true. At the same time, of course, the next generation iPhones hopefully will finally be 8K, and we will also be certainly looking forward to the latest upgraded ARM performance there, which promises also to make 8K 60 a possibility.
This brings the presentation to an end. I hope it was interesting to you. Thank you very much. And back to you, Liz.